What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Joe from Odyssey Off-Road here. I'm gonna do a little experiment with the RMAX 1000 today. So if you guys haven't seen my previous videos on the RMAX, check them out. But I picked up this machine about 4 or 5 months ago now. Been enjoying it. Pretty much stock. So what we're gonna do today is we're going to disconnect the rear sway bar on the machine and see how it performs. Now you may be saying to yourself, Joe, why disconnect the rear sway bar? Why not disconnect the front sway bar? And that's a good point, because that's what a lot of people do on their machine. They'll disconnect the front sway bar and leave the rear. I'm disconnecting the rear and leaving the front because I have the 4-seat RMAX, and the difference between the 4-seat RMAX and the 2-seat RMAX is the rear suspension. Both the 2-seat and the 4-seat have a front sway bar, but the 4-seat RMAX has a rear sway bar, and the 2-seat RMAX does not have a rear sway bar. 2-seat RMAX has a little bit more suspension travel because you don't have the floor to compensate for the seats above the rear suspension, so it enables some longer shocks. So what I'm going to experiment is just to see how it affects the ride quality, if it's beneficial or not, and how much more flex we get out of the rear sway bar being disconnected. So for now, I just disconnected it. It's a 17 millimeter bolt, and then you're gonna need a 17 millimeter wrench on this side here to hold it. So when you disconnect, and then I just got a zip tied up out of the way right now, as you can see, and should be out of the way enough for us to test it out. So I'm gonna take it out. I'm gonna hop in the unit here. We're gonna take it out to the desert, local to the house here, and see if we can find some spots where we can kind of test the flex of the rear suspension, as well as just the overall feel of the machine with the rear sway bar disconnected. So let's go. All right, guys. So we're out here in the desert, kind of fooling around a little bit with it. You can see, I'll show you from one side to the next and from the back. I apologize right now. It's super windy today, so we're gonna make it short out here. We'll get back to the shop and I'll give you my final thoughts, but you can see there's a lot more flex. I got the right rear wheel up on kind of a berm, and the all other three wheels are down on the flat area, and there's definitely a lot more compression versus there would be on just one particular wheel if the sway bar was connected, from previous tests I've done with the sway bar on. So you can see there it's kind of tucked in a little bit more. Show you from the back. The machine is very level, but you can see just the right rear wheel has come up, and it's allowed the left rear wheel to drop down. It's probably about, it's hard to, the camera doesn't really do it justice, but you're probably talking about a 10-inch difference from where the right wheel is on to the left wheel. And then you can see the spring on this left rear shock is way more open. So front, and the front's pretty level. So we'll get back to the shop here out of the wind, and I'll give you my final thoughts. It's definitely got its goods and its bads. All right, guys, we're back in the garage after our little test drive. It wasn't a long one because it didn't really take me too long to determine that removing the rear sway bar is a bust. I would not do it. If you thought about doing it, I'm glad you watched this video first, because I can tell you, you probably end up getting yourself killed or rolling your machine, because it was borderline uncontrollable in a turn. Anything over 13, 14 miles an hour. I definitely wouldn't go over 15 miles an hour with it and turn, make any sharp turns with this rear sway bar off. So as soon as I pulled out of my driveway here and went down the block, I kind of just turned the wheel left to right subtly just to see how the car would react, and you instantly felt the leaning of the machine to the extreme level. So I would say if you're driving at 10 miles an hour or under, and there's some really rutted out uneven terrain or rocks, it probably will soften up the ride in a way. Maybe less body reaction of the car. As the rear wheels are moving more independently, it'll soak up the bumps a little bit, or the ruts, take them a little bit better with it off. But I don't know anybody that drives 10 miles an hour or under for their whole trail ride. If you do, leave a comment below. I'd love to know where you ride. But I don't think that it's a beneficial thing to do. I think it's borderline dangerous. I definitely do not recommend doing it. I'm going to be hooking mine back up. Like you saw out there, you do get a little more articulation in the back, but you can't have fun with the car at all beyond slowly, putting down the trail on some rough terrain, because you can't flick the back end. You can't get sporty with it at all. It just becomes dangerously unstable. It really, the rear end, the car just sways heavily. I mean, you can see just how easy it is for me to push it with it off, and how much it's moving with one hand. So you can imagine with the weight of the car, making a turn and it leaning, what you're going to get. So don't do it. I'm glad you watched this video first. If you thought about doing it, that's the whole point of this, really. Try things out, see how it works, and give my recommendations to you guys. So I appreciate you guys tuning in. Maybe we'll do another video where we disconnect the front sway bar and see how it reacts that way. Maybe it would be like the opposite of effect of the two-seater RMAX, which has no rear sway bar but has a front sway bar. Maybe if we disconnect the front sway bar on the four-seater and leave the rear sway bar connected, it'll give us a similar feeling. I'm not disappointed with the way the machine drives. I was just doing this really for experimental purposes. I think it articulates pretty well with the sway bars on. These sway bars aren't that thick that come on this car, so I think they're on there just enough to kind of keep you stable, in all honesty. So we'll do another video, though. I got another video coming up soon about my overall thoughts and opinions on the RMAX. After I've had now several hundred miles on it, I'm going to give you some pros and cons to the machine. And we'll talk about my thoughts on how it's handled so far, any problems, stuff like that. So subscribe if you haven't. That video will be coming out. If you haven't seen my original intro video on the RMAX, check that out. And check out a couple other videos I did with the fluid changes, the how-tos, which can be a little tricky on this machine. So appreciate you guys watching. Please smash that subscribe button if you haven't. Like, share the videos, and we'll see you on the next one.